Hello everyone, welcome back to my channel. Today I'm going to dive into a comparison of acrylic gouache because over the past few months or even years I've collected a wide range of acrylic gouache and I just ended up collecting way more materials than I actually needed, and most of them didn't even work for me. So yeah, to help you avoid doing the same mistakes as I did, I decided to make this video, and I hope it will also help you make more of an informed decision if you're on the search for an acrylic gouache. This way you could also save your time and money. And otherwise, if you're just curious, I hope you would enjoy this video and see how they compare. So let's dive right in. So as you can see, I've gathered a couple of brands. Some are officially labeled as acrylic gouache and others are just technically matte acrylics. Some of you might say, yeah, but they're actually all matte acrylics, and I do agree with that. What I refer here, however, as acrylic gouache is more acrylic paint that have similarities to traditional gouache. So they have a matte finish, they're velvety, and they're opaque, and ideally they have a minimum color shifting, or they color shift to a more lighter color like gouache does. Amongst them are the HOLBEIN acrylic gouache, Turner acrylic gouache, Turner Japanesque acrylic gouache, SONJA matte flow acrylic, LEFRANC BOURGEOIS flash, masterclass tempera from Nevskaya palitra, and MAIMERI polycolor. Also, as a comparison, I will be using regular gouache to compare how they behave in contrast to acrylic gouache. So here I have the Lascaux gouache, the LEFRANC BOURGEOIS Linel gouache, and the Rosa Gallery gouache. I will then also be swatching everything in this Canson watercolor paper. Okay, so I've shared this paper over 8 compartments. We are first going to swatch the regular gouache and then continue on with the other acrylic gouache, and for this I will also be using the Rosa Start Synthetic size 10 brush. So what is gouache? Gouache is a water-based paint similar to watercolors. It also often has a gum arabic as a binder, and it has some chalk that makes it more opaque. And it is, well, because it is opaque, it allows to work from dark to light in comparison to watercolors where you have to work from light to dark. And the reason why I chose yellow, red or magenta and a dark color here is because I wanted to go with a light tone, sort of a mid-tone, and then a dark tone to help better with the comparison. Now, acrylic gouache paints are paint made with acrylic polymers. Some of the ones that I'm going to show you today are also made with vinyl polymers. I don't really know what the difference is, but basically acrylic gouache should have almost the same feel as traditional gouache and also the same finish, only it's not water reactivable once it's dry. So when it comes to texture and handling, the HOLBEIN acrylic gouache has a very smooth, creamy feel, almost like regular acrylic paint, and you don't need to water it down at all. It's ready to use straight from the tube. On the other hand, the Turner acrylic gouache needs some dilution. If I remember, when I received it on the box, it said that it is recommended to mix 2 parts paint and 1 part water. And also, from all the matte acrylics and acrylic gouache I've tried, this Turner acrylic gouache feels the closest to traditional gouache. Also, from all the acrylic gouache and actually also matte acrylics I've ever tried, the Turner acrylic gouache is the one that dries the fastest. And when I say the fastest, it dries very, very fast. So if you would like to work with this, I do actually suggest using a slow drying medium or a stay wet palette. The Turner Japanesque acrylic gouache is formulated with fine powders according to their website, and it has a unique coarse texture. I think you can also see it here. It's a bit more gritty, it's like it has sand in it, and it has beautiful Japanese assortment of colors too. I do find that you also need to water them down a little bit, And for the feel, it's very difficult to compare them with others due to this coarse texture, which makes them actually quite unique. So for this one, I think someone on Reddit mentioned that it is an acrylic gouache. This is the SONJA acrylic paint. And according to their official website, it's a flow formula acrylic, it's opaque, and it has a matte finish. But it is water resistant and it doesn't crack. And after testing it myself, I find that it behaves very similarly to HOLBEIN, and it's very smooth and you don't need to water it down, and it's ready to use straight out of the tube. Next up is LEFRANC BOURGEOIS Flash Paint, which is a vinyl emulsion paint. I find it to be very opaque, and it also dries matte with a velvety finish, quite similar to traditional gouache. In terms of feel, it doesn't have an ultra smooth texture like you get from HOLBEIN, for example, or MAIMERI. Instead, it lays somewhere between regular gouache and HOLBEIN acrylic gouache. It also has a sort of a slight grit to it, not super gritty like the Japanese gouache, but mixed media do layer very well on top of it. The Masterclass Tempera by Nevskaya Palitra is made with a polyvinyl acetate dispersion. I'm not entirely sure what that means in terms of binder. I found it on their website, so I don't know if it's technically a vinyl or a polymer binder or both. But it does dry with a matte finish, it's opaque, and it's water resistant. And yeah, it's actually fulfilling the key characteristics that I'm looking for in an acrylic gouache. And that's why I've also decided to include this here. Last but not least, we have the MAIMERI Polycolor. According to their website, it's described as a fine vinyl color, which means that the binder is an ultra-fine vinyl emulsion. They don't really mention whether it dries matte or not, but in my experience, the finish ranges between matte and satin. What really stood out to me is that, how it feels during application. Even though it's technically a vinyl paint, it does feel quite differently compared to LEFRANC BOURGEOIS or Masterclass Tempera. It feels more like an acrylic. It has a slight gooey texture. Okay, so here I'll quickly show you that regular gouache do reactivate when you go over it with water, and the rest, so all the acrylic gouache and the matte acrylics, are not reactivating when you go over it with water. And if you do see a little bit of color, do not worry, none of them reactivated, it's just that my brush and the water I used are just dirty from all the swatching that I did. So here I am looking whether or not there is a sheen to the paint, so I can see a little bit of sheen or more of a satin finish on the SONJA as well as on the MAIMERI. So I suppose that when you apply them thickly, they will have a more of a satin finish. So what I'm doing here is testing whether these paints color shift as they dry, and as many of you know, traditional gouache tends to dry to a lighter shade than it appears when it's wet. On the other hand, acrylic paint often dries a bit darker, so I wanted to see how these acrylic gouaches behave in comparison. Now, for most of the paints I tested here, they all showed very minimal color shift. The most noticeable one was the Turner acrylic gouache that shift slightly lighter once it's dry. The SONJA, the Masterclass, and the LEFRANC BOURGEOIS, I did dilute them a little bit when I was doing the swatch, so I think this also might have affected the result a little bit, although I do hardly see any color shifting, and if there is any, it is very minimal. For the MAIMERI Polycolor, I saw a slight shift to a darker color once it's dried, and for the HOLBEIN, yeah, I hardly see any shift at all. What you get wet is what you get dry, as per my testings. And overall, I'd say the color shifts are extremely minimal across all of them, and yeah, we're talking about very subtle differences here. The next test I'm doing is to see how well different colored pencils lay over them. So for this I picked a mix of light and dark colors plus this green one. And I'm using a variety of pencils from different brands to test how both oil-based and wax-based pencil perform. And amongst them I've included the Caran d'Ache Luminance, Derwent Lightfast, Faber-Castell Polychromos, Derwent Drawing and a Derwent Colorsoft. If you would like to skip this part, I added the time down below where you can watch the results. Otherwise, you could also use the timeline because I've shared them in different parts, and just skip to the part where you would like to go. Okay, so let's go over the paints I tested and compare them across a few key factors. These include how the paint feels when applied to surface, the type of finish it gives, so whether it's fully matte or it has a little bit of a sheen, how well do other mixed media like colored pencils layer on top of them, and how quickly you tend to go through the paint because you need water to thin it down or you don't need water at all. And finally, I'll also go through the drying time, whether it dries super fast or gives you a bit more working time to blend stuff. But before we dive into the details, I just want to make it clear that everything I'm sharing here is, so with this comparison, is based on my personal experience. Everyone's preferences and experiences with paints can feel very different depending on how you also use them, and also depending on the pigment in some paints. So just so you know, I didn't sit down with a stopwatch to measure, for example, the drying times or anything super scientific, you know. These are just my observation based on my experiences from using these paints with my artwork. And one more thing, paint can behave differently depending on the pigment. I think I already said that earlier. So your experience also may vary per color. And that said, the differences between most of these paints are actually quite subtle. So I'm not saying that they're the same, but some brands, I might say that some brands dry faster or feel smoother. That doesn't mean that it's dramatically different. However, I hope that this comparison would be a helpful background info for you, for your research on looking for an acrylic gouache, and please definitively take it with a grain of salt. Okay, so I will let the image speak for itself. What I mean by gritty here is like the Turner Japanese gouache, where there's like some pieces of sand in the painting, whereas smooth is where it's super slidey like acrylic paint. We could put traditional gouache here somewhere on the left side, not really gritty, but a little bit on the left end of this chart. So here the reason why I placed MAIMERI and SONJA on the right side is because if you apply them at thick consistencies, some colors can have a slight sheen to them. And for the layering, at the end of this video, I'm still going to show you a scan of all the swatches that I've made so that you can see them clearly and compare them by yourself. And here, as I said earlier, here the differences could be very subtle and also varying between colors or pigments. Some colors could dry faster than others. Oh, and I also forgot to mention earlier, I've also included the price for comparison. Of course, prices can vary a lot depending on where you live and where you buy your supplies. For reference, I'm based in Europe and I usually buy my art supplies in Germany, the Netherlands and Spain. So if you're elsewhere, the prices might look very different for you. So I've based the pricing here for comparison per liter. As an example, sometimes when you buy like a single Turner tube, usually an 11 milliliter is like €3.70, while if you buy like a LEFRANC BOURGEOIS flash paint, it's like more than €6 per tube, but then you get like 80 or even 120 milliliters, I don't remember. So even though the flash paint seems more expensive at first glance, it's actually the cheapest per liter out of all the paints I tested here. Here are some snippets of some of the paintings I've made with those materials today. I hope you enjoyed this video, and until next time, bye bye!